down who knows when in history. Okay, so it's a very interesting book. It has the Colosseum, what it looked like, etc. And Mackenzie, thank your mom for kindly sending this in. And I will tell you one thing that you want to do in your life some point. Okay, I may long be in your past, but someplace my voice will be talking to you. You make sure at some point in your life, preferably sooner than later, go to Rome. Okay? It is one of the great places in the world to visit. There's so much history there. Our tour guide, we had Franco. Okay, the last time I was there, his last name was unpronounceable, so we just referred to him. And we were always saying, Franco. So he said, just call me Franco. But wonderful Italian historian who was our tour guide, and he arranged for us the simply most magnificent thing that I will remember to my dying day. Our last night in Rome, we went out to a lovely Italian restaurant, had a delicious meal, and everybody was getting ready to say their goodbyes, because the next morning we were all going our separate ways back to England and the United States, and one couple were from Australia, etc. And we'd been together for 14 days, so you get to be almost friends. And after we had dinner, he said, I have one last thing I want you to see. So we all boarded the bus, and we came roaring through the streets of Rome, and we came around, and we came up into St. Peter's Square. And I don't know how much you know about St. Peter's. You'll know a lot before the year is over, but it's the world's largest church. And it is the Roman Catholic Cathedral in the city of Rome. It's where the Pope presides at Mass, and the Papal Palace is right next door. And the square, which actually is round, okay, was built, architects Bernini and Michelangelo, numerous other famous architects participated in the construction of the building. It took about 100 years to construct. And the square is on a pretty good scale that will accommodate 250,000 people. Okay? So we're talking about quite a large place. And we came up into the square and came to a stop. It was midnight. Okay? So the square was totally empty, about 2 minutes of midnight. And we all got off the bus, and St. Peter's is illuminated just like the monuments you've seen in Washington, D.C., at least on that scale, beautifully illuminated, surrounded by this immense colonnade of Roman columns around the outside of the square. And just at midnight, the bells of St. Peter's struck. They do a series of chimes to announce the beginning of a new day, and we were all there sort of. It was one of those things that you can close your eyes and see. That's been 10 years ago, but I can see it now in my eyes just as clearly as I was standing there. So one of the places you must, I'll point out some of the places as we're going through this class that you must visit in your lifetime. This is one of the places that you definitely need to see. Now, with that, okay, we need to make sure we have covered these things. As I'm constructing the test, here's what I'm going to be putting on it. So would you check your notes to make sure that we're in agreement? We had discussed why Rome fell. Have we not? Okay, is everybody comfortable with that? Does anybody have any questions? Why Rome fell? Because this will be, after some math questions, the first things that I will ask you. Okay? Number 2. We have talked about the dates 476 and 1453. Have we not? 476 when the Roman Empire collapses in the west, when Romulus Augustulus is overthrown as the 76th emperor of the Roman state, and the Western Empire disintegrates. We all know, of course, that the eastern provinces remained intact and reformed kind of amoeba-like around Constantinople as a new empire. And this empire lasts for nearly another 1,000 years. It's known as the Eastern Roman Empire, and it collapses in 1453, right? When the Muslims take over the city, okay? Yes?
What's the Pax Romana?
Pax Romana is not government, well, I guess a little bit of it, but it is the civilization of Rome, Western Rome, Rome, okay, starting with the Emperor Augustus Caesar and for 200 years afterwards. Okay? It's when those of you that wrote about Roman civilization and all that gave to us, you were talking about the civilization of the Pax Romana. It means, literally means in Latin, Roman peace. Okay? All right? Everybody comfortable with all of that? The third thing I have on my list of things to go over before we start our last thing, and then we'll be done with Eastern Romans. We talked about Justinian, did we not? But we did not mention Theodora. Did we mention Theodora? The lady that you see up here is the Empress Theodora. And she was Justinian's wife. She had started out as an actress. And in ancient Roman society, an actress was a couple of notches, but only a couple of notches above a woman who stands on a street corner, if you understand my drift. And the Eastern Roman nobility looked down upon her because she was common, they thought. However, she turned out to be one of the great personages of the Eastern Roman civilization. In fact, there's a lot of historians who argue no Theodora, no famous Justinian. On several occasions, she showed that she had more backbone than he did, that he might have cut and run or not done the right thing or screwed something up, and she said to him, Justinian, you must do X, Y, Z, and he tended to listen to her. Okay? Very interesting woman, Theodora. So there were, but with every emperor, there was usually an empress. Okay, this is the only empress I'm talking about out of the 76, or probably far more than that, since men tended to outlive women in those days. We talked about the fall of Constantinople in 1453, how Eastern Roman state kept shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and eventually it's a husk of its former self, but with the splendid capital city still, and how the Muslims surrounded that. The Eastern Romans fought passionately and valiantly for days trying to keep the Muslims out. The wall system around the city, and I have not been to Istanbul, but I'm told by those who are, what bits of the walls are still left are quite impressive. They're 60 feet tall and as thick as this room is in length in places, okay? Massive walls. But the wall system that had done such a good job for hundreds of years defending the city, now we're being bombarded by a new device called cannons, because the Muslims had this new weapon, crude by our standards today, but cutting edge at the time period of 1453, and the walls simply weren't a match to it, and big sections of the walls began to collapse. And one particular large section collapsed. The Ottoman army surged through street to street, house to house, fighting, extremely savage. They fight their way to the center of the city, which is still the center of the city, where the great Santa Sophia, Church of the Holy Wisdom, stood. And there they battered down the doors, came in and massacred thousands of Christians that had sought refuge, expecting some last miracle to save them. Muhammad, not the Muhammad, but a Turkish leader who had the same name, stood on the altar with his shoes on, which we'll talk about today, the significance of shoes. And he stood on the altar and pronounced that this Christian church was no longer Christian. It was now an Islamic mosque, and that is the final end of the Eastern Roman Empire. Okay, now, anybody have any questions about our major things we talked about last week? Yes, dear?
So Muslim and Islam are like the same?
Islam is, if Christianity is the faith, a practitioner is known as a Christian, okay? The Islam is the faith, the practitioner is a Muslim, okay? Now, we have people in our society that use that word incorrectly, and I may even be guilty of occasionally saying Muslims. I don't think so, I'd never say it, but you will sometimes have people use the word Muslim like it's the naming of the religion. It's not, it's just the practitioners, okay? Now, does anybody have any questions about any of that? Then we have one last thing to talk about. Write down, after today's date, 31st, write down the Eastern religion. Jesus Christ was born. He lived. He preached. he in a sense wrote, because his disciples wrote down essentially what is the New Testament. Okay, and some of you probably have in your personal religious library a New Testament in which the words of Jesus Christ are usually in red. Okay, so some of it literally is verbatim, and some of it's also text. And in the process established a religion, was crucified, died, and if you're a Christian, you believe resurrected thereafter. Whatever he did, and whoever he was, it was big. Now, yes, the Eastern Mediterranean, as we talked about earlier, when we talked about the multi-god religions, and we talked about Cynics and Stoics and Epicureans and all that sort of stuff. The Eastern Mediterranean and the whole Mediterranean orbis terrarum in general was thirsting for something new and rich. The multi-god religion, a lot of Romans found not particularly touching, not particularly strong, I guess. It's not a good word choice, but I guess I have to work. And for whatever reason, whether it was the power of his speech, the power of his ideas, the thirst for something new, or maybe the divine intervention, Christianity spreads like wildfire. In the beginning, amongst the lower classes and the disaffected people, people that were minorities, oppressed minorities, etc. But pretty quickly up through the ranks of Roman society into the equestrians and even aristocrats. For the first several hundred years, that religion, of course, had to be practiced in secret. And if you go to Rome, for example, in the catacombs under the city of Rome, there are places where, to this day, that they can take you where Christians practice their faith literally underground, okay, because the religion was banned, okay, in the Roman state until we get to Constantine. And, but it grows, okay? And just like if, I don't know, Mr. Baker here founds a new religion, Bakerism, okay? And we are exposed to the ideas, so Mr. Bills is having a coughing attack at the thought of Bakerism back there. As we are exposed to these ideas, Mr. Baker, and some of us, Volts goes off to Volts land, okay? And Summers goes deep south to Somerville, and Jackson goes off to Jacksonburg, okay? We may take your ideas and interpret them slightly differently and develop different customs, etc. And that's exactly what happened with Christianity. You want to write down Christianity began to develop different forms, different sections, different parts, different groups, whatever word works for you. Okay? And there are many of them. Some of them have faded into oblivion. Some still exist. I will give you 4, I guess. Okay? So you might want to number 1, 2, 3, 4. One of the earliest, and today one of the smallest, was the Christians that took the ideas of Jesus Christ and went to Egypt. Okay? And there they settled and they proselytized their ideas amongst the people there. And today in Sudan and in Egypt and in Somalia, that area, there are minorities, and sometimes they today live a really rough existence because that's a heavily Islamic part of the world. But they developed a form of Christianity which still exists, and it's called Coptic Christianity. So one of the great branches of the Christian faith is the Coptic Church. You probably have never heard that term. I suspect I, when I was your age, hadn't either. Okay? Coptic Christianity. I know of only one Coptic church in all of the city of Columbus. There's one on the west side where there's a fair number of people live from that have settled here from that part. Most of them are Muslims, but a few of them are Somalis and other northwest Africans. And there is a Coptic church someplace on the west side. I've never been there. Okay? All right? A second great branch of the Christian faith is the area around Constantinople. The Eastern Roman Empire was a Christian state. Okay? Now, when I read to you what happened to a lot of the emperors, they didn't always practice their Christianity. Okay? Just like it probably is true of us today. But they were officially, and most of people were Christian. Okay? We call that Eastern Church, okay, the Eastern Orthodox Church. Eastern Orthodox Church. O-R-T-H-O-D-O-X. What does Orthodox mean? If I say to you, oh, that's an Orthodox idea, what am I saying? Aaron? It may seem strange to us, but that's actually not what the word Orthodox means. Normal. Who said normal? I thought somebody said normal. You're exactly right. Orthodox means normal, acceptable, correct. Okay? They believe they are correct, and all the rest of us in the world of Christianity are wrong. Okay? The Eastern Orthodox Church. And this thing comes in flavors. You have the Bulgarian Orthodox Church. You have the Romanian Orthodox Church. You have the Russian, which is the biggie, Russian Orthodox Church. Okay? But they're all shades of the Eastern Orthodox faith. Okay? We'll come back to this one. This is the religion of the Eastern Roman Empire. We'll talk about it more in a moment. In the West, we have a disciple of Jesus by the name of St. Peter. Right? St. Peter? Everybody knows St. Peter? St. Peter comes to Rome. He begins, this took guts. Okay? He begins preaching this new religion. Okay? That disavows the deity of the emperors in the capital city of the Roman Empire. And as you can imagine, he was very unpopular with the Romans. And but he gets a lot of followers. Eventually the Romans will seize him, okay, put him on trial, condemn him to death. They have him crucified on a hill at the edge of the city, okay, upside down, not crucified right side up, but according to the story of us, he was crucified upside down. And he was died and buried. And on top of that site, eventually when Rome becomes Christian, they build the cathedral as the center of the city called, what was the name of the cathedral? St. Peter's, okay, that's why it's called St. Peter's. And under the altar at the end of the sanctuary is the tomb of the disciple Peter. And about 20 years ago, just about the time you were born or a little before, the Catholic Church finally allowed archaeologists and anthropologists and forensic people to examine the tomb. Okay, and I've been to the tomb, but not legally. I was with a former Madison Plains teacher, Mr. Moody, Ken Moody. Okay, and Mr. Moody never saw a sign that said you can't do it that he didn't want to. He's one of those kind of people. And he was with me. He said, "Hey, Jackson, let's go down there." Okay, I said, "Ken, it says no entrance." "Oh, that doesn't mean anything." So we go down, okay, and I'm having visions of any moment you're going to see on the news at home, okay, 2 Ohio men were arrested illegally being in the tomb of St. Peter's, okay. But here we are in this dark, empty room with just St. Peter and us, okay. There's the body, I mean, what's left of the body, the bones, okay, in the little tomb thing there. And when they examined those bones, they decided that the age was right. The condition would tend to indicate that the person had suffered the form of death that they were talking about. And probably what church tradition had always said was the tomb of St. Peter's probably really is. Okay, all right? This church is known as, the church based on Rome is known as the Roman Catholic Church. That's why some people say Catholic, other people say Roman Catholic, because it's a church based in Rome. What does the word Catholic mean? C-A-T-H-O-L-I-C. C-A-T-H-O-L-I-C. If I say to you, "Oh, you have a very Catholic taste in films," it doesn't mean you only watch films about Roman Catholic saints, okay? If something is Catholic, or you have, oh my heavens, you have such a Catholic way of eating. That's a bad sentence, but maybe you understand the idea. What do I want to say? You have a very Catholic taste when it comes to food. If I say that to Mr. Pickens, what am I saying?
Straight.
No, good try then. Yeah.
We're fine.
Well, I'm sure the Roman Catholics think that, yes, but no. Okay. Yeah.
Superb.
Pardon me?
Superb.
Superb, no. Catholic means inclusive, okay? Including everyone. Including, so if you are a Catholic, if you have Catholic taste in foods, you eat everything from Mexican to Thai to Vietnamese to good old American hamburgers, okay? You like all of it, okay? So, we have these two churches, the Eastern Correct Church, and the Roman, we include everybody, we are the masters of all the key idea church. Do you think there's going to be friction between these two?
Oh.
Those of you saying, oh yes, nodding to me, you're absolutely right, okay? And we're going to talk about that later on. Now let me, number 4, the last thing is this. Then we'll take care of the Eastern Romans, and we'll take a quick break. What happens in 1517 to the Catholic Church? For 1,000 years, if you lived any place from Poland west, you were Roman Catholic. If you went into Mount Sterling, and Mount Sterling was in any place in Western Europe, not Ohio, there would only be one church in the center of the town, right down where the city hall is now, and everybody in that town would belong to that church. Okay? There was no religious freedom, there was just the Roman Catholic faith. And if you weren't a member of that church, your marriage was illegal, your children were bastards, and when you died, you weren't allowed to be buried in the cemetery because you weren't of the faith. Okay? And to this day, you can go to some cemeteries in Europe, and you will see these little graves on outside the walls of the cemetery, and you know what they were. Okay? The people of their time viewed them as bad people. They weren't worthy to be buried within the walls. Now, what happened on the 31st of October, 1517? No, good try. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. You're getting to the Church of England is one of these things. Okay. A man by the name of Martin Luther, a Roman Catholic priest, doctor of theology. What did he do? Who are my Lutherans? You got any Luther? Oh, man, Nikki Moeller. You should be popping out answers here. Okay, is Nikki the only Lutheran in this? Are you a Lutheran also? Now have you gone to church classes to become a Lutheran? Oh, now you know the answer to this then. What did Martin Luther do on the 31st of October, 1517? No, well he did later on after he ceased being a priest. He got married. You know, priests aren't supposed to marry. Married a nun. Okay. Yes.
Did he nail something?
Yes, he nailed on the, notice the name, Wittenberg church door, a document called the 95 Theses. Don't write it down because you're going to have a whole unit on this coming up at Christmas time or shortly thereafter. Nailed a document called the 95 Theses, which established a group of people that said, we protest this, we protest that, we protest this, and those people today we call, well, yes, Lutherans are the first of these, and then we get Methodists and Church of England and so on. Yes, we are Christians, just like Roman Catholics are Christians. Yes, Protestants, those who protest. Okay, so the four of the, and there are others. Remember, these aren't the only ones. We're just listing 4 big factions of the Christian faith. Coptic Christians, some of the earliest. The Eastern Orthodox Church, based on Constantinople. The Roman Catholic Church in Rome, and then the Roman Catholic Church was split in 1517, 1,000 years in the future, you know, from where we are right now. And that's where we Protestants come in. Most of you in this room, Madison County is pretty heavily Protestant.
What's the difference between a Christian and a Catholic?
There isn't. They're all Christians.
Well, then why are they based different churches?
Pardon me?
Why are they like different based churches? Because Catholic has a lot more like strict.
Yes, well, they're the original form of Christianity, and Protestants are the other forms of Christianity. If you trace your family tree back, Mr. Cheney, You go back far enough, when you pass 15, 17, you'll be Roman Catholic. Everybody in this room has Roman Catholic background, because if you go back far enough, that's what you run into, because it was the only church people could belong to.
So then why do they have different, like, some churches call themselves Christians, others call themselves Catholic?
Because, well, the Catholics know they're Catholics, so they don't have to put the word Christian in it, okay? And the new churches, some of them put the word Christian in, just about everybody knows what they are, okay? There's going to be a huge rift in Christianity in the West between these who are protesting and the mainline Protestants. There's going to be wars, bloodshed, violence, all sorts of stuff, and we have a whole unit on this at Christmas time. Yes?
May I use the restroom? I really have to go.
Well, why don't you, but I've got 3 things, so make sure you get them down when you come back.
Okay.
Thing number 1, okay? Thing number 1 is this. If you are an Eastern Orthodox Christian, I'm planting lots of seeds right now, you have a leader at the top, okay? The church is pyramidal. Somebody at the top runs the show. This is not a democratic church, okay? The emperor, the Eastern Roman emperor, usually appointed the guy who was the top of the church. And the guy at the top of the church usually did what he was told. He had a title, okay, and that title is Patriarch. P-A-T-R-I-A-R-C-H. Is that right? I better write it on the board. Spelling off the top of my head is Patriarch. P-A-T-R-I-A-R-C-H. Patriarch. That's the head of the Eastern faith. Okay? There is still a Patriarch of Constantinople. And today that city, of course, being Istanbul, that's kind of a dangerous job, being Patriarch of the Christian church in a Muslim city. All right? Patriarch. Everybody in this room can tell me what church was his cathedral. But no, he's the head of the Eastern Orthodox Church. The word cathedra in Latin means chair of the bishop. Okay, we'll talk more about this later. But a cathedral is the reason cathedrals are big is it's where the bishop has his chair. The cathedra. He sits in the cathedra. The building is the cathedral. All right. What's the cathedral? In Constantinople. Now, folks, when you learn this stuff, you just can't file it away and not use it. Santa Sophia, the Church of the Holy Wisdom, was the center of the Eastern Orthodox faith. Okay. Number 3. Third thing you want to write down at this point is the Eastern Orthodox Christians have considerably different beliefs than we do. Okay? And later in this year, I'll come back to this and we'll talk about it. But they have considerable difference. Okay? And the 4th and last thing before we take a break is this. Where is there an Eastern Orthodox cathedral in Central Ohio? Cincinnati, wonderful guess now. I'm sure there is an Eastern Orthodox church in Central Ohio. Not Mount, to my knowledge, there's not one in Mount Sterling. No. Columbus where?
Oh, I know.
Where?
West Side
Where? Certainly you've all been there. How many? You've all been to the Arena District or the Short North, right? Okay. On North High Street. I thought I mentioned that. On North High Street. Just about where the cap is on High Street that goes over the interstate where it goes through where all the restaurants and stuff are. They built the bridge over the freeway and put shops along. It's called the Cap. Right, just a couple blocks from the arena, okay, is this big beige church with a dome on top. A dome, amazing, a dome on the top of it, okay. The dome looks like this. That is it. That's the inside, okay, of the church. And that is the Cathedral of the Annunciation, which is the Greek Orthodox Cathedral in Columbus, Ohio. It is open to the public, folks, as a part of your education. Sometime when you're up in that district, it's in the daytime, walk up to the church and say, would you mind if I take a tour? And they'll show you around. It's beautiful on the inside. Well, they probably will. when I became a Methodist, I don't know whether those of you that are in here are Methodists, but maybe not today because the Methodist Church has membership problems anymore. But when I became a Methodist, my minister said, I want you to choose any 2 other churches, and before you become a Methodist, go and spend a Sunday at one of those churches. And there was a group in my MYF unit class that we went, Methodist youth group. We went to the Church of the Annunciation. That wasn't this church, that was the old one, for that day. Okay. Now, you need to stretch. What time does this fella? 55? Yeah. It does ring at 55? Yeah. We're done. Call her quick.